So my name is James Kirk. Yes, that's for real. I do go by Captain. That's also a thing. And this is Jack Birkenstock.
I go by Jack.
Also simplified. We represent an organization called the Bodhana Group. The idea behind the... Popping peas already. The idea behind the Bodhana Group is that we utilize therapeutic functions in tabletop gaming, board games, card games. This morning we're specifically going to be talking about RPGs in an attempt to kind of focus and drill down to behaviors or things that we can pull out of games that can improve on certain behaviors or aspects of somebody's life, and also just generally to kind of talk about the things that make you feel good in a game. This is not to say that, hey, I slayed the dragon, I feel good. Yes, that's a thing, you can do that. But there are other things that go with RPGs that are of benefit to everybody, and that's kind of what we're going to discuss this morning. So out of you that have played RPGs or role-playing games before, how many of you have played an RPG and got up from the table and felt like you wanted to flip it and then go home? Okay, you're the people we want to talk to.
Yeah. We have cards.
So after we're done with the discussion this morning, really what we want you to get a sense of is some of the things that you can take away from a table and bring back to what we assume are your groups, the people that you game with on a regular basis. Some things that you guys can discuss openly, because there are discussions that need to be had by a role-playing group or any kind of a game group before you start. There always has to be rules and boundaries that are set, things that you discuss, what makes you comfortable, what makes you uncomfortable. Are there things that are taboo that you guys would rather not discuss? Because RPGs are very immersive. They're one of the most immersive forms of gaming that you can have. And there are going to be some things that as you get further immersed into these worlds and these characters and you're playing as these individuals and telling a story together, there are some things that can get pretty dicey, and if you're uncomfortable dealing with those subject materials, even with your friends, right? Yeah.
Nice.
If you're uncomfortable with those kind of things, it can cause some issues at the table. So, do your thing.
All right. Just to give you kind of a little bit of a background on myself, so you're kind of like, well, what the heck are these guys talking about therapy and gaming about? I've been a master's level therapist now. I've been in the mental health field for about 16 years, specializing with victims of abuse, also adolescent and pre-adolescent perpetrators of abuse. So, I've had kind of a long history working with all kinds of different populations. And one of the things that we kind of fell upon as an organization was that we used to run RPG groups at the facility we worked in. And we found out, kind of quickly that a lot of the guys that we had worked with, these are kids that wouldn't speak to each other in the light of day, but here you go throwing them around, an orc stronghold, and all of a sudden they're the best of buds. And they had kind of this shared common goal. So, one of the things, and this is kind of where a lot of the presentation's really going to kind of focus on, is there are basically aspects of the RPG hobby that just by default are paralleled by a lot of therapeutic approaches. And our goal here isn't to vacuum suck all the fun out of your RPG session. So, I want to slay that orc with my broadsword. And how does that make you feel? No, that's not what we're doing.
But that orc was somebody's dad.
Exactly. Yeah, you're really bumming me out after the onslaught. But it's just that there are a lot of very natural byproducts of this hobby. So just playing alone can be therapeutic, because even things like conflict and struggle, going through a lot of those things, your brain's still learning whether or not it's real or imagined, perceived danger or what. So we usually add a minefields ahead slide at every Bodhana training because it's kind of become the new thing, trigger warnings, but we actually did it first, so, well, I think we did.
Yeah.
But there are really not a lot of minefields to what we're going to talk about today. It's just, there's a lot that's out there with RPG and tabletop board gaming. Our hobby has exploded in the last 5 to 10 years, which honestly is part of the good reason that we're kind of coming out here talking about this. 20, 30 years ago, there would be, religious protesters out front because, we're talking about devils and demons. Isn't that what D&D stood for? So with that, thank you, a couple of people from the dark times.
I think in the 90s it was dice and dime bags.
Dice. So again, we're just going to kind of dive in. We're actually going to discuss some potential clinical applications at the end. We actually have a video that's going to showcase a demonstration of the use of therapy in a gaming session. So very much thanks to those folks for letting us use that clip. So
They're good people.
all right.
What is an RPG? Okay, let's not get
Rocket-propelled
remedial about this,
grenade.
guys. We all know what an RPG is.
Oh, not that one.
Otherwise known as ERPIG. RPGs, I found this very interesting. We were having a discussion a couple of weeks ago about this. RPGs used to be really thick books with a lot of dice and a lot of rules, and even games like Traveler, where it was entirely possible for your character to die during character creation before you even actually get to play the damn game. Like, character creation was the game. Thanks for coming. Or Champions, where you needed to have at least an associate's degree in math, you know. Or Palladium, which was all of the damn 10-siders all of the time. And now you have games where they're selling quick start models. And they're giving you pre-generated characters, which they didn't used to do. And they're telling you, if you want to play this game, we want to make this accessible. And I think that's the key moving forward, is that RPGs are becoming more accessible to a larger group of people. Because now you can buy the little starter box set and get 5 characters and get you and 4 or 5 of your friends together and start playing a game. And you don't have to read a massive 400-page tome, to really understand the game. You can just kind of dive in, put your toes in the water, get the rest of you in there, and then see if you like the swim. So it's really taking you to an imaginary world, yes, like it says on the slide. I like to think of RPGs as a form of group storytelling. Everybody is involved in the model of telling this story. Yes, you have a GM or a person that referees the game. That's true. Yes, that GM feeds you situations where you're going to have to react to, but a lot of times in really good sessions, the GM is part of the storytelling process, but they draw as much from the player experience as they do from what they already have prepared. They can change the game as it goes. You can change the game as it goes. It's the ultimate choose your own adventure, and it makes it not only super immersive, but very personal to people, which is again why this therapy model works so well, because it's very internalized by the end of things. So here, kind of stretching off to what James was just talking about, here are a lot of the aspects of RPGs that we kind of know from the hobby. Like we said, it's a very imagination stimulating activity. We have a lot of the social interaction, just getting around the table with a group of people. You need at least 2 to have any half-decent RPG session. When we talk about that social interaction, you do start to learn boundaries. Certain jokes are cool, certain jokes are not cool, and this also helps kind of develop those social skills. Looking back on all the research and everything that we're finally starting to get back in studying RPG, we're starting to find out that kind of iconic representation of the loner gamer who doesn't know how to deal well with others. No, we deal pretty well with others. That's kind of our stock and trade in what we do on the weekends. It's all about talking and interaction.
We have we have what we like to call the social skills.
Yeah, the socials. With that, we have acting, we have learning about cause and effect and consequence, learning the rules alone. Even though a lot of systems have slid away from tomes that could kill a child being a rule book, Dungeon Crawl Classics, if anyone is familiar, it's about an inch-thick rule book. Phenomenal system if you're into the old stuff, but learning rules can give you anything from math skills to reading skills to comprehension to history. D&D 2nd edition, they used to have these source books about cultures. Those were just as informative as any textbook, and a kid would much rather read one of those than they would, any other kind of book. What's that?
Yeah, the endless GURPS books. All of the GURPS.
Yes, with all the settings.
Is there anybody here who has read more than 5 of them?
You guys, I have more time on my hands.
Never too much. So one of the things that we want to kind of do is, I see a lot of nodding, a lot of shaking of heads and stuff in the crowd. So obviously we know these things. But what we're going to kind of do I don't know if you want to use the phrase kick it up a notch, take it up a level, bam. Am I dating myself with my
You
references
just went
now?
Emerald. I can't.
Wait, am I the weakest link?
Goodbye.
All
I'm
right.
a little old. But we're going to start to talk about some of the therapeutic underpinnings and how we're going to actually see matches between actual therapeutic modalities, systems of treatment that are utilized and how they match with aspects from the RPG hobby. Which, first and foremost, group therapy. This is kind of one of my specials. I've been running group in my sector for, well over 10 years. Pretty much, small number of clients are treated together as a group. Group context and process utilized by a mechanism of change, developing, exploring, examining interpersonal relationships. It can be support skills, skill training like anger management, social skills. So, in simpler language, both a game group and a therapy group have a lot in common. They have shared goals. You're all sitting down at the table for the same adventure, for the same purpose. You may not handle it in the same way, but that's okay. You both have a facilitator, GM or the group leader. You have rules and norms. And this is really where group as D&D becomes one of the most therapeutic aspects, because when we talk about group, there's what we call Tuckman's group model. And this is a model about how every group, now this is not just like a therapy group. If you've ever done a school project, if you've ever done a work group thing at, your place of employment, every group goes through these 4 stages as they meet and greet for a common goal.
It's really neat to see, like, even if you have the same group of people that stop at the same bus stop every day for like a month, these, like, the same group of people that don't know each other at all, they eventually, without knowing it, will subconsciously use the same model.
Oh, yeah. Because, you think about it. You get around the table. This is your forming stage. Even if it's a new game, you're still kind of pretending to get along, so you're kind of feeling each other out for some of those social boundaries. It's like that. It's like that initial stage of when you've met someone and you're kind of in that, you're in love, and like everyone's being on their best behavior, and you're not really arguing with each other. Then eventually storming comes along and the clouds start to, raise themselves and get gray, and all of a sudden it's, why are you doing that? That's not in the rules. That's a dumb move. Why, we start to challenge each other, which is okay, because now we're starting to do things like self-advocate. We're doing things like we're starting to test the limits of those boundaries with each other. And this is good because it tests the group's ability to work through problems. So it also is developing the individual's ability to be able to take stock of what everybody has to offer and take stock of what they have to offer towards the group. So then as they get further through, we start to norm. We start to learn, okay, this person's this kind of player, so let's let them have their moment. Let's let them do their thing. And after we get through norming, we eventually come to a point where we start working together on a shared goal, and we're working very well, and we have a lot of functionality as a team. Every group will go through these stages. And it's not a once and done deal either. Every time there's a new arc to your campaign, there's a new struggle, there's a new form of conflict. Conflict is how we learn. We don't change unless we're discomforted enough to decide, I guess I need to work on this. So this whole model has at its heart, there's going to be conflict. You're going to disagree about the way to, invade that Shadowrun tech fortress.
This will also happen every time that you introduce a new person to your group. You guys might have already gone through all of this. You could be a group of 4 or 5 people. Decide you want to go to 6. Somebody has a friend that, is interested in the hobby, or wants to try it out or whatever it might be. And then you introduce that person. The whole group, not just that person, the whole group goes through this process again. And it just continues.
And that's kind of a good thing, because the more that you're exploring different avenues of conflict in different people, you're now learning different skills from different areas. You're learning to deal with different types of people. So now we're talking about patience, we're talking about tolerance, we're talking about collaboration and cooperation. There are, one of the biggest things that we love about the fact that therapeutic gaming is getting out there more into the mainstream is D&D.
It lets us go to really cool places to talk about it?
Oh, heck yeah.
All right.
Can't wait to get to that arcade. But Parcheesi and Monopoly are being replaced by D&D as the family game night. And that is so incredible, because I'm just thinking of it like from a developmental psychology point of view, where I'm like, all these children are learning these skills and they don't even realize because they're having fun.
But the child in me still loves the frosted side.
Does that mean you're an ice mage?
I am, yeah. Finger waggling, that's my thing. So expressive therapies, Jack said, as he told you earlier here, he's got a degree and he's all fancy and he does therapy stuff. I went to school for theater. Thank you, yeah. And like most
Props
good...
department? Just
Shut up. And like most good college students that pay attention to their bank accounts, I left before I finished. So, I know a lot about theater. I just don't have the piece of paper that can tell you, like, oh yes, I did all of the studies and did all of the things, so you should listen to me.
Useless, you don't need it.
Word, thank you. 1,000 bonus points.
Please tell everyone that you can acquire it.
So the use of creative arts as therapy, unlike the traditional arts expression, the process of creation is emphasized rather than the final product. Expressive therapy is centered on the assumption that people can heal through the use of imagination and various forms of creative expression. What the crap does all of that mean? This is where you're allowing yourself to use your own expression at the table to create a character, acting out things, acting out whatever the story presents you, as far as like, having something on your mind. Maybe you want to tackle a tough subject. So we have different types of expressive therapy. We can go through art, drama, music and writing, play, sand tray, dance.
Roleplay.
Yeah, hugging. That's always a fun one. So through these different types of expression, you can actually find and discover new things about yourself. I know you've heard this before, and you may have even believed it before, but have you tried it before? It's the process of actually letting go and allowing yourself to have that experience, to have that moment, to have that aha, to have that time where you walk away and the star flies over your head and you have that more you know moment. And then you thank the local celebrity that they schlepped over to stand there and look at you in the screen for 5 seconds at the time.
Nice use of schlepping, by the way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, not a problem. So kind of taking expressive therapy to a little bit more of a specialized kind of area, this is really where we're starting to get into some of the deep therapeutic aspects that share a lot with the RPG hobby. Psychodrama, spontaneous dramatization, we're using role-playing, dramatic self-presentation, like these are where people really are putting themselves into kind of like a one-man or one-woman show. And in other ways, I heard a hum, where people can recreate real-life situations. They use this a lot with children and a lot with couples, specifically in couples therapy, where it's like, well, you're going to role play now the whole situation of asking for extra money or whatever, but you're going to play the part of the other spouse. Or, if we're talking about anger within a family structure, well, you're going to pretend that you're your brother arguing this so you can see that person's side. One of the kind of difficult things about psychodrama is the fact that you are really putting yourself out there. and you're putting yourself out there in a very open and exposed manner. And a lot of people are like, well, RPG, how does that really match up as far as, psychodrama? Well, let's think about this. Anytime you make a character, that character is going to contain part of you. And we'll talk about this in a little bit with a specialized concept. But when you play aspects of a character, whether it's you want to be the humorous character or you want to be the really serious, dramatic, I have no family, the orcs killed everyone, one of the, those...
You really hate orcs.
I do not.
I don't like every time you come up with this.
Orcs are valid people.
They make lovely baskets.
Well, they've all...
I challenge you to use kobolds next time you use an example.
Challenge accepted. But the whole idea of playing out these aspects in our character, and we actually have a separate training that we do, or not a training, a separate presentation that we do that's all about examining a character sheet and how, it parallels with human development and moral development and, how we get into the deep psychology of just that, two-sided sheet or 12 sheets if you're playing Hackmaster. But I broke James. But when you talk more about like putting yourself out there in terms of emotional content, the role of psychodrama can be something that sometimes you don't even understand or expect. Because normal psychodrama, we're role-playing an argument from somebody else's perspective or acting out the impact of disability for empathy. One of the examples that I give, and James and I try to give examples from both, is one of my favorite games of all time is Call of Cthulhu. I've been running that sucker since 2nd edition. I'm anxiously awaiting my 7th edition Kickstarter to finally come to me. Oh, yes. And I was running a campaign where one of the players was playing an alcoholic. And a lot of times when people take these kinds of disads, whatever, in a game, it's pretty much a point-buy thing. Whatever, I'll play an addiction. I was like, no, we're really going to play this here. We're really going to simulate as best as we can understand. So, what was happening is, I talked with the person playing the character, and she would always, nip off to feed the cat was the excuse that her character had. And over time, when the character was drunk, we would impact the die rolls. We would put like a penalty on because the character was soused. On the other hand, when it got further into the campaign, when the character wasn't drinking and they were going through the DTs, they would get a more severe penalty. And that's kind of how addiction would affect a person. And it was very interesting the way the group dynamic, without knowing the way her and I had set this whole thing up, the group started to not rely on the character in situations. And the character was a very intellectual character. It was a defrocked professor. Long story, because gamers can tell you tons of long stories about characters.
You all have them.
Oh yeah, you do. And you'll tell us them at the break. But what she actually came up to and she was like, I'm getting really frustrated. And I was like, why? What's going on? She goes, well, they're not asking me for help. And I'm like, so what do you think about that? And she actually was like, it's very interesting because I kind of see myself getting ostracized and I'm getting estranged from my friends and my core social groups because of an addiction I don't really have. But it gave her an incredible amount of insight into what it might be like for someone to have an addiction and how that might disrupt them socially. That I didn't set out to plan the adventure that way. I'm going to teach you a moral lesson. I'm not that creative. well, now I am because I know how to do all that stuff. But then it was just we were playing for fun, and art imitates life. It is not the other way around. So when you're playing out these relationships and these personalities within the game, this is where psychodrama really comes in because we're playing out the way that we view the world through the psychodrama of our characters' interplay, because that's part of us. It's the way we look at things.
For anybody how many of you GM in the room? Okay, perfect. That's a ton of you. Fantastic.
Awesome.
Something that I, as a GM, kind of force my players to get into the habit of doing when they decide that they want to have some kind of a disability, or they want to, somebody thinks it's really funny to be like, well, I just want to have one eye. Why do you want to have one eye? Well, because I need another hindrance so that I can buy more, another attribute point later on in the character creation process. And then you feel like you want to slap them in the face, and then you remember that they're your friend and that you're going to get over this. But it's something that I force my players to do is not just to write a character background, but to actually kind of detail the story on why that disability exists. I want you to write 1 or 2 paragraphs that tells me if this character was explaining to somebody else in a bar or a quiet moment during the game, hey, what happened to your eye? They've got some kind of a story to tell. You need to tell that story before you're going to play this character. And then not only that, but you need to dive into how the character overcomes that so that you understand how to overcome that, so that you can play that disability at the table. We even get into the concept of, what were your character's parents' names, and, what word, if you were to open this character's fridge right now at home, what's in it? Are they well stocked? Is it just, a bottle of ketchup and, some salt packets and a bottle of water that's half drank?
What about 2 cases of MREs?
You could also do that too. So there's a drill down with this to really make it effective, and I think as a GM, you have to force your players into that. Yes?
How do you force them to? I have a group where 5 of the 6 are willing to do that, and my 6th person's like, I'm just here to play. And I'm like, but everyone else is putting, 2 pages into their character, why they did this, why his leg broke, and why his arm broke than the other. And they don't want to.
So as a group experience, everybody's looking for the same thing at the end of the day. They want to feel fulfilled with whatever they're experiencing at the table. And some people, I don't want to say unfortunately, because I don't want to be, like the fun Stapo, and tell people this is how you have fun and that's it and you will have fun this way. Some people just have fun, showing up and kind of phoning it in, so to speak. They come and they just roll their dice or they do their thing, and that's what's fun to them. And if that's what's fun to them, that's cool. But the drawback to that, and I think I would find a way to maybe play this out in-game, is when you do that, there is less of an experience for not only that character, but the other characters at the table that are interacting in that group. They don't know that character as well. There's less chance for subplots with that character. And when everybody else is enjoying their time in the spotlight, this person eventually is going to get that same left out feeling that, well, when is it my turn? And I think that's when you can kind of revisit that conversation and talk about, how do you feel about this? Not to, how do you feel? But, to really discuss, hey, here's some things that you could do that could give me some ways to work you into this game the same way that I'm working in everybody else.
Yes, okay, I have to ask, can I come up there? Because I basically learned all of that hard way, and I wrote a book about it.
Did you?
Yes.
Can I see it? Exhibit A?
Interesting.
That's a glass. Okay, so this is a user's guide to the apocalypse. Page 1. No, I'm just kidding. We're not gonna.
Story time.
But it is 400 pages about how.
It really is.
Basically, I had an experience with a role-playing group that we were basically just free-form role-playing in the comments of a Homestuck fan fiction, and then it sort of became a giant psychodrama on accident. So now I am writing the rules to do it on purpose.
Interesting.
So I had to do the research.
What's your name?
Elaine Wang.
Elaine?
Everyone calls me OJ.
All right.
I technically have business cards,
I like
but they've
juice.
gotten my music on them instead of my gaming, so I'm gonna have to write on those when I come.
So here's what we need you to do. If you would like to talk about psychodrama and the effects of psychodrama on a group, you can speak with Elaine after we're completed here. Sound good?
Sure.
Awesome. You rule. There was somebody else that had a hand up earlier. You. Yeah.
Just a suggestion for when you're playing with gamers who aren't necessarily story-oriented. I mean, apologies for creating a dichotomy here. You got your story gamers and you got your tactical gamers.
Sure.
And what I've found to be successful with the tactical gamers is when they get a new item or ability, have them like show it off and describe how they got it. Because typically they're excited about like the next feat they got or the new spell they just learned. Something like that. Like that's usually a good opportunity to like trick them.
See, like just a guide appears out of nowhere above their head, like, so you want to learn cleave. Yeah.
Tell me more. Enhance.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. That's a good idea. Write that down. Okay.
Okie dokie, Skip.
So when we're talking about psychodrama, one of the byproducts of us playing role-playing games is the idea of bleed, and this is kind of where we're going with some of this stuff. Role players sometimes experience moments when their real-life feelings, thoughts, relationships, physical states spill over into their characters and vice versa. In role-playing studies, we call this phenomenon bleed. When you create a character, and I know that we all do this, you put some of yourself in that character. You kind of have to. In most cases, I'm not going to say have to all the time, but there's a need to understand character motivation during a story. And at least in the beginning, it's easier for you to find aspects of yourself in the character that you're playing to better portray it during the story. And what ends up happening is you internalize it and it becomes a personal experience for you, and you're going along the journey with your character at the same time. And sometimes it doesn't become what would your character do, but it becomes what would I do if I was this character. When you start asking yourself that question, that's a bleed effect. That's what happens when the game has become so personal to you at that point that you're willing to insert yourself as that character into the game, and you start making some of those decisions as yourself. And in Bleed, we can find a lot of exploration of self with that, because you learn things about yourself that you never knew. One of the best examples that I can come up with, we ran it was D&D 4th, so it was D&D the MMO. And
Wow, D&D.
tactical boxes and stuff is on cooldown, and yeah. So while we were playing this game, the campaign went for like 3.5 years before we broke the game through levels, because it just became a meat grinder. But one of the ways that you can really study bleed is by tackling the moral conundrum during a game, not having to fight things, but to have some kind of moral decision. So the decision that our group was faced with was to combat a dark god that was attempting to rise up again. We had to go find weaponry, ancient dwarven weaponry, because dwarves, right? They're really good at making that stuff and then hiding it. So we had to go find this stuff to be able to combat the dark god, which ultimately is where we were headed. Except that we had helped foster a kingdom along the way. And the king that we had helped ascend to that throne was being attacked by the dark god's forces. And the choice that we had to make was to go and get the weaponry that we knew we needed, or to double back, go back to the capital, and try to save as many of the people as we possibly could, because if we didn't go back there, we're the heroes of the realm. If we didn't go back there, a lot of people were going to die. You know, and these were people that we had worked alongside of to help build this kingdom. So here's the 7 of us sitting here having a moral conversation about the math of war. You know, do we sacrifice 20,000 people? And for us, it was not a number. For us, it was NPCs. For us, it was people that we have, as our characters, have had experiences with over the 3 years that we played this game. And I'm the rogue. Very pragmatic rogue. And my decision making should have been, well, we need to go get the weaponry. And it wasn't. Because in that moment, I was me. And I had some heads turn and look at me because my character hadn't been like this up to this point. And I'm all of a sudden like, we need to go back and save the people. And they're like, what? I don't even know you. Like, you get that moment where there's a line.
You used to be cool. What
Right.
happened to you?
Right? Because the fighter was like, I was depending on you to talk about the weaponry. I thought that's where we were going. Now you're siding with the paladin? What's wrong with you? You know, but it was that moment where I was not Thufir. I was not my character. I was now me wearing Thufir's skin, saying, we can't sacrifice 20,000 people just to get the stuff that we need. There's got to be another way. And you learn about yourself when moments like that happen. So can be conscious or subconscious. I think we already covered that. Mine was totally subconscious. I wasn't even thinking about it. And then I went, oh, nope, that's a decision I would make. Can shield us or open us up to experiences. Again, you're put in situations where you're not thinking you're ever going to be placed, because that's one of the beauties of RPGs. You can act out and do things that you don't get a chance to do in real life. None of us are going to hack a major corporation, I don't think. Okay. And at the same time, be coordinating a hit squad to go in and get the microchip that we need, a la Shadowrun. You know, but you get a chance to do those kind of things. And when you play out those fantasies, those dark moments where you're like, I have always wanted to punch something so hard that I put my fist through it. Secure the door. We can learn to control bleed and use it as a tool. When you play RPGs, you get a tendency to experiment with yourself, right? Like you're not only experimenting with character development, but you're experimenting with opportunities to learn about you. And there are some times where if you're conscious of the effect of bleed, you can actually force your own character development during the course of a story by bringing those identities of self into the game that you're playing. And maybe you didn't have an opportunity to build a little bit of yourself into that character, and this is the time to do it. Like, you can identify those moments. You can enhance the game or protect your feelings of security. Sometimes you can go a little introverted.
Yeah.
You know, you can decide to be the silent majority at that point. Maybe you're really vocal, and that's something that is out of your comfort zone. Maybe you are an introvert, and you can take times during a game where you can be a little quiet. You know, maybe you can sit back and watch for a bit and share the spotlight. Use of safe space, signals, and group consensus is important. So I'd mentioned earlier that you want to talk about boundaries in the beginning of the game. When you guys first form your groups, and I'm curious who's done this, how many of you, when you formed up your groups and you guys got together to play, how many of you actually talked about the rules of etiquette? And I don't mean like how to play the game. I mean like in yourselves, interpersonally, how many of you guys discussed before you started playing what's comfortable, what's uncomfortable? Good. Some of you did. Those of you that did, have you found it to be an enhancing experience at the table? Does it make it more comfortable, and are your players more open to those experiences? Okay. That's something that I really want to suggest that everybody that has a group does. Maybe even if you just go home, like when you're done here and you have MAGFested, that's a verb now, I think I just made that a thing.
It is now.
When you have done your MAGFesting and you go home and you guys get together with your group, really take a minute and sit back and be like, you know, guys, we've been doing this for 6 months, for a year, we've been doing this for a week, I don't even know you. But you know, while we're waiting for the pizza to show up, and thank you for bringing the Cool Ranch Doritos, because anybody that doesn't is a communist. I would suggest you take those couple of minutes and you say to yourselves, you know, like we might be dealing with some heavy stuff here. I'm thinking Shadowrun at the moment.
Okay.
So with Shadowrun, there's a lot of violence in Shadowrun, guys. You know, and the idea of violence can lead to subjects like assault, you know, which people don't think about, and like brutal beatings, subjects of things like even like sexual misconduct and things of that nature. These things need to be discussed before you start your game. What's comfortable, what's uncomfortable. If there's a lot of racial tension, I will get to you in a moment. If there's a lot of racial tension in the game, if you have a lot of different races, is there a racism in your game? Because according to the book, you know, dwarves hate elves, or, you know, nobody likes trolls, or whatever the case may be. Are you going to play those things out? Is that a comfortable thing for you to be able to explore? Because when you're experiencing bleed, if you don't discuss these things, when you start to get into the role-playing experience, your players, if the GM gives you something that's a racial situation, there's a hate crime in a town. You know, if you guys haven't discussed this and some of your players are really uncomfortable with it, they will pull back. And sometimes, I don't want to say violently so, but people get offended by stuff.
Yeah,
you know,
it's definitely jarring.
And you don't know what that offense is going to be. I'm trying to write a narrative for something right now at work, and I was going to use a German as the villain, because he's a professor, like doctor, you know, like haha, evil guy, twirling his mustache. Germans are classic bad guys. But we live in the middle of Pennsylvania Dutch country. So my boss points out to me, she's like, I don't know if the German Americans are going to get offended. And I went, we have German Americans? Is that I thought they were just Americans. Why are they? Okay. So we can't be, is there a nationality that's okay?
Mennonite of murder.
Yeah, like I don't want to crap on the French. Are they there? What am I supposed to do? Right, Russians, sure. You know, and then somebody rolls in with the child like, I do not find this funny at all. And then you're like, crap!
All right, who invited Dimitri to the session? We knew this was going to happen.
But if you haven't talked about these things, it gets uncomfortable, and you can tell immediately. It's palpable. Everybody's having a really great time, and then you introduce this situation, and you get done describing it as the GM, and your players do this. Dude, I'm really sorry, I have to go to the bathroom. You know, and then, yeah, somebody puts it out on Tumblr, like, my GM last night, fuck.
Yes, if you need a resource on this social contract stuff, look at the Nobilis Second Edition, the Great White Book. There is a section about the social contract. It's mostly for that game, but you can lift it for other games.
You are a walking encyclopedia, and I like that. That's awesome. Thank you. So yeah, I think we've discussed that.
So, I mean, at this point, normally we're going to actually go into quote-unquote case study territory, and we're going to kind of show you an example of how this could play out. So, we're going to take as a situation a young man who is recently been dealing with his parents' divorce. His parents have been violently fighting and arguing. He feels that he is forced to choose between them, and he is the oldest of 3 children. What do you think we could offer this young player?
A coffee
Very nice. Very nice. We have been bested.
I'm sorry, I'm picturing this kid having to talk to his parents and he's still got the bloodstained animation on him. It's like, guys, I think what you're doing is really wrong. Like, really? What were you into before you came home for dinner? You said play with your friends. What happened? Well, Bobby had an accident.
Got a little out of control.
Darkspawn.
We were trying to, you know.
Say, if anything, through a role-playing game, you can give him agency. Like, make him feel as if he is able to make a choice, and then make that choice the right choice, regardless of what it is.
Yes, and even within that, explore the potential consequences of either choice. Yeah, I mean, one of there's always consequences, and one of the huge things that we love about RPG is this concept called therapeutic distance or aesthetic distance, where, as we were saying earlier, I am my character, but I'm not really my character. That's that dude or that girl.
I am my character on Friday nights between the hours of 7 p.m. and 12 a.m.
Yes, and doing that is very freeing for a person, especially if there's difficult material that's going on there, because I have enough distance to be shielded from what a real world ramification might be. In the real world, if I have to make that decision between mom and dad, there's some pretty severe consequences that could happen there. Some pretty ugly things that might get stated. But again, if exploring the idea of, choice and agency, I can explore safely what might happen as a consequence. When we're talking about working with social skills, there's a group called Wheelhouse Workshop. They're based in Seattle. They're very good friends and a partner with us. They run social skills groups for teens using D&D. And, we talk about this concept of aesthetic distance all the time, in the fact that, kids are going through these narrative structures. And, here's just a couple of therapeutic examples. You could discuss the split in the kingdom between a king and a queen. You have to, of course, we'll get to some helpful hints and advice. You don't want to make it too heavy-handed, like, King Bob and Queen Margaret. Hey, wait a minute. That's my mom, dude. You could include a split in the party, where the party starts to have a disagreement and an argument about, which way to go on a quest or which quest to take. You can create tension between the players to create conflict. So the person's getting used to handling people who are in conflict-oriented situations. Because bear in mind, the brain's learning, and I referenced this earlier, the brain basically has this system of multiple couriers, and they carry new information to any address in the brain that looks similar or relevant. And it connects it to that information we already know. So if I'm dealing with conflict in a fantasy sense, my brain's still making a neural connection and a pathway that is helping my brain regulate what happens when I explore and experience conflict. Doesn't matter that it's a fantasy setting. The brain's still doing the same work chemically, so you're still getting the benefit of that, which is huge, because neural pathways are when information gets solidified and it's connected and it's mapped. It's there. We could have the player stumble upon domestic violence situation. Again, when we talk about some of the advice, and we're gonna kind of go through a little video example of this, which some of you may have seen this video actually. We have a man in his 20s who has just broken up with a girl that he was very enamored with. His friend running the game is aware of the pain that he is feeling, so he sets about a role-playing intervention. So let's see what that might look like. Whoa.
Questions, will the video work?
Oh no, why wouldn't that work?
Just double click on the video.
I tried.
It says like the menu that says the play button down down there.
Oh, what? Oh.
Bam.
Yay!
No? It's all right, it's all right.
Can you try from there?
It's a picture.
No, I had a video on there.
It worked at home,
Yeah,
right? I'm gonna get in front of people. This is gonna be awesome.
this is,
Shit. Is gonna happen, and we're gonna make it happen. All right, if this doesn't happen, I need everybody to take out their smartphones and look for this clip. We're gonna time this. I'm gonna count down
we'll
from.
see it.
No?
It'll come. It'll
Okay.
happen.
All right, so just in case it doesn't, we're gonna time this from 3, and everybody's gonna hit play at the same time.
We could just hand out the.
Yes.
list here.
I will say that the bleed effect in Virginia actually does work. When I was younger, I got tested in the syndrome I have, the white knight syndrome, is what the therapist called it, where I would go out of my way to help people when I really shouldn't. And I got hurt really bad most of the time. I LARPed, and the therapist said, be more active that way. Be the good guy character that saves the day there. And by doing that, I actually have a lot more control of my life. So having understanding of the
Shouldn't be.
I'm playing a fantasy game where I can go ahead and let myself be silly stupid a little bit and save the damsel or try to be the good guy and die doing it means during my real life, my wife actually put up with me, and I'm not an idiot. So
Are you gesturing to your wife that's here now?
yeah,
Okay.
but it does work. So I mean, understanding when you see the bleed effect go through and accepting that this is a part of me and I can work with it, it actually can help focus your life a lot better.
Yeah, I have the,
That's exactly the kind of thing that we're looking for when we do this, is to have those experiences, to have people have that moment where they understand it. I think I suffer from the same
trying to
syndrome
figure out how to get that.
a lot of times because I overcompensate for my friends and hurt myself in the process. So I very much understand like where you're coming from with that. And specifically using RPGs really does give you an outlet to
What
be
kind
able
of phone is this?
to do those types of things that maybe you know you shouldn't do, but you get it out of your
I
system.
only have
You know, you don't feel the need as much
fancy.
to do it in your real life when you're able to do it, pretend.
It gave me a balance. It let me recognize by LARPing or playing D&D or Pathfinder or whatever, it let me recognize the situation now that I'm like, I'm overstepping my boundaries. Let's take care of myself for a few minutes, and then, you know, I go, hey, that was the right idea to do.
Yeah.
Do something else down the road, and I'm not letting myself get hurt. Because
You just YouTube?
I'm trying. It's not giving me access for whatever reason.
I have internet connection.
Yeah, so I don't know why. Okay. This will happen. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, I have a USB.
So much like RPGs, this is a group of people
Actually,
coming
right.
together to fix a problem. The GM, i.e. technology, has set us up with an issue. We as a group are working together to fix it.
All right. Thank you.
Yay, IT husband.
Did we high five too soon? Or then?
Possibly. Because this one is from yours. This is not from mine.
Okay.
It'll show up. Yeah, it should show up down here. And then the one with the check mark, I think. No. 'Cause connecting it to this should put a little icon. This is how I download all my music.
Yeah, I don't. Huh. Perhaps.
So it was referenced earlier said, how can I make my group do something like engage as a character and everything? You cannot make anyone do anything. You have to meet someone where they're at. I'm sorry, I had to say that. I'm actually a therapist. I just wanted to make sure.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Don't try and force someone to it will do that.
Yeah, for real. My wife is in the front row. There are some TV shows I can't force her to watch. I tried to get her to watch Daredevil.
That was pretty good.
I think it was like 2 episodes, right? No, we just moved on to other things, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Really, it's not, but she's here, so I'm going to say that's okay.
Is what?
I don't know.
Are you tethered to more than one device?
No. No, just the one. All right.
Oh, wait. Something's happening. Full screen that thing. Guys, wait. It's thinking. Buffering.
Buffering.
Loading.
I can't connect
Loading.
to the Wi-Fi here, so.
Loading.
Yeah, we've been having that. Yeah.
I think to connect to the Wi-Fi, you actually have to solve a bunch of riddles like Gollum.
I probably.
And
It might be because my phone was asleep. Try it again.
Because I use this to do all kinds of wonderful stuff.
yeah, it might be.
It's starting.
Yeah, tell me about it.
It is not Google's fault. Do not say that it is Google's fault. The Googs are always listening. I'm sorry, Google. I apologize for his blasphemy.
My hotel roommate works for Google. I am sure I am going to tell him about this.
Do you want to just?
Maybe just go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Well, we tried.
Yeah.
That's a good acronym for terrible network.
Might just not have enough juice from the hotspot.
Yeah, it might.
It's
not,
entirely
we
possible.
Might not. Fred. Act it out. The very idea. Theater men.
Look, I went to school for theater. That does not mean that I have to actually use practical applications in my real life, okay?
All right. So do you just want to go to
Yeah, just go to the next thing.
All right.
Sorry, guys.
Yes,
The video is
our
not cooperating.
apologies. The interwebs are being non-responsive here. and this is kind of going to some of the considerations that were being talked about here is one of the things that if there is going to be a pure therapeutic, i.e. clinical approach to this, couple of things. One, play must include a safe word.
Asparagus.
There is actually a system coming out designed for children, for anyone who's aware of it. It's called No Thank You Evil. It's being made by Monty Cook Games. And one of the things that's kind of amazing about this system is the title of the system itself is a safe word. If the content that you're doing is too difficult or too traumatic or too frightening for the child to play, the key phrase is no thank you evil. And the game stops, you assess kind of what's going on, take care of it, and kind of proceed. Two, players should only be exposed to things that they agree to. This kind of goes along with the idea of trust and the idea of rapport. One of the interesting studies that they've done recently is they always kind of do this like every 10, 15 years where they go, what's the best form of therapy that we have available? And, you know, they crunch the numbers and talk to the people and look at the slides. And we kind of keep finding out that aside from very specific mental health disorders that require a specific form of therapy, it really kind of doesn't matter. It's the strength of the connection of the relationship between the therapist and the client. And it really makes sense in any pedestrian explanation we want to use. I talk to the friend that I trust the most. Why? Because I know that friend is there for my benefit. So I know that they're not going to feed me a whole line of meaningless BS. So I trust and value them, so I trust and value what they say. So if I'm going through some rough stuff and I'm not at that point where I want to work through it, it's not a good idea to spring that on me in the middle of a session. I have seen people try to do this, and it goes very badly. And not only does it have the potential to ruin friendships, but on a bigger level, this is one thing I say in all my mental health trainings that I do, it takes years to heal a person. It takes seconds to destroy a person. And we really, mic drop. And we really need to be cognizant of the fact that because we're playing around with material that can be very sensitive and internal to a person, don't tread that boundary lightly. Or to the next point, if you're talking about an actual mental health diagnosis, if you're not a trained therapist, don't do therapy. We joked a little bit about degrees and such, but there is training involved, and it is there for a reason. Now, if you're a parent and your kids are arguing with each other on who's going to do the dishes that night, yeah, you can simulate conflict in an RPG. You're not dealing with something like, mainline clinical depression, or, someone with a bipolar mood disorder or post-traumatic stress, okay? Those are serious mental health conditions that mostly require that level of oversight because you need to gauge the reaction of the person. So like we said, some simple skills, very fine to use in these examples. And here are just a couple of the ways that we can inject that into role-playing. And that's actually one of the things that the Bodana Group is working on, a book about how to bring therapeutic content into a role-playing game. It's being written from the perspective and design of looking actually like an RPG manual. So it'll go through each chapter of like what is an RPG, how to pick one, how to handle conflict in an RPG, with advice on what you could do to inject a little bit more of that beneficial aspect. Totally separate from what we're also doing, which is a pure clinical approach, which we're developing in partner with Wheelhouse Workshop I mentioned earlier, and some other professionals. So
Good job.
thanks. Thanks, at practice.
You talk pretty.
I use my words. So, any questions?
We're going to open this up to the floor at this
Yeah.
point. With authority.
So I'm a substance abuse therapist,
Okay.
CSB, and there's a lot of adolescents I have in my group that talk about gaming and things like that. Is that a program or something along with substance abuse treatment? Is that something that can go with you guys, what you do? I know it's kind of hard, but.
Oh, no, I mean, sure, she was stating that she works with adolescents specifically in substance abuse, and they've been talking a lot about gaming, and I guess you were wondering about, the possibilities of bringing that in, if those modalities might connect. Well, I would say that what you first kind of need to identify is what the needs of the individuals are, and what system or setting or even type of game might be better for them, because there's really a lot to consider when you talk about therapeutic role-playing. You're talking about the intellectual level of the person, to being able to understand rules. When you're talking about like folks perhaps on the autism spectrum, you're also talking about the difference between like concrete thinking and things like theory of mind, where I personally don't like minis. I don't like maps. I've never felt that if I'm in a fight, I'm going to have the availability of that kind of Sherlock Holmes breakdown of the way things are rolling. But to a person on the autism spectrum, they may need that spatial recognition system to be able to look and go, here's the fight and here's the way it's working. Additionally, some individuals I worked with who have what was, I guess, formerly known as Asperger's. Technically, it's the prince of mental health now. It doesn't exist anymore. It's the disorder formerly known as Asperger's. Basically with that, like a lot of those, the guys that I've worked with, for very, very difficult time with change or a break in routine. So, I mean, after going through all that, which are considerations, it's really mostly about finding the right property that can represent what the struggles are and finding that agreement with the players that, hey, we're going to talk about your stuff, so your issues are going to be out there. We're going to do it in a way that it's not calling you like, and you come upon, this tribe of kobolds. Call back. And Bobby, I'm talking to you. Family struggles, hint, hint. Might be a little club heavy at that point.
Confrontational, kind of like we do confront in groups, so it's not anything like everybody very much accepts responsibility of action.
Okay.
And obviously, like 99% of the clientele, there's some sort of abuse or trauma from their past.
Right.
So that's why we do the family group piece as well. So,
To be honest, what you might want to start with, if you're looking at like the narrative structure of a traditional RPG like D&D, I might suggest going with something like Fiasco, or something that's a little bit more of a narrative game that doesn't have a lot of rule constructs. And honestly, Fiasco is dealt about, holy crap, this all just went, it's the game of snafus. And they have so many different scenarios that, like, they have ones that take place in like 30 speakeasies, and they have ones that are like 70s, drug epic dramas. And the players create the roles somewhat randomly, but you can actually pick them to be therapeutically relevant from the selection they have, and they narratively explore the roles that they're playing. It's a very easy system to pick up.
I would also probably suggest that if they're ready for this, to put them in the roles of being the caretakers. Like maybe giving them an NPC that was suffering from some of the same things they're suffering from, and give them an opportunity to apply some of the skills that you've been teaching them, and see how that works in a controlled situation, like where they can be a character in a game, and it gives them the ability to have that, like, reset. Do you want to continue? 10, 9, 8. It's a safe way for them to explore those coping mechanisms without having to feel like I'm going to somehow damage my life if I screw this up. And by giving them that safe area to play in, you can actually gauge their growth by seeing how they do taking care of somebody else that's experienced the same things they have.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things I'll definitely get to you in a sec. One of the things that I would say is, if you would like, I mean, Bodana also does, we're looking to branch out into consultation in terms of like helping places develop therapeutic adjunct systems. So if you want after the presentation to come on up and speak, we'll make contact and we can do all of that, trust me. Yeah, there is a ton that you get. What were you gonna weigh in on in there? Yes.
Beautiful.
Really, instead of having someone be like, oh, well, what is your action? Well, I'm the fighter, so I guess I swing my big sword. You can literally take your turn to affect the environment in some way. So you can set up situations where, okay, maybe going and hitting somebody in the face is not going to be what you want to do. What are you affecting your environment? How are you affecting your environment and creating an advantage for everybody else that's going to take their turn coming up? So really kind of building on that, not only cooperative aspect, but also you are taking a positive step in changing your environment.
Yes.
As a direct example to that, because I've run Fate and I love that system to death.
The aspects are so.
One of the things that we had was a situation where the players were trying to escape on a plane, and the plane was not starting, and the security and the guards were coming in, and they were kind of overwhelmed. So one of the characters came up with the idea of taking a fuel depot and just shooting the bejesus out of it to create a firewall, thereby laying down cover fire and obscuring them so they had more time to work on the plane. It wasn't a direct effect against the other things, it was an effect where they created what they call an advantage on the table that any other player can activate during their turn or can use. You're essentially helping out everybody else, but Fate gives you the ability to tangibly write it down like on the table. This is now a thing that exists in your world that's able to be used during that time. It's really cool. Yep. Yes.
My inner GM and my inner therapist are struggling with the time management issue of a group session. How do you do that? Because I can't, you get somebody activated in an individual session, they can get up there, you can bring them back down. But you put a table of, I don't know what your typical group size is for these kids, but
We
one 5-minute session, how do you do that?
honestly, one of the big kind of rules of thumbs we look at is kind of just letting it be what it's going to be. There is sometimes kind of an abrupt nature to the end of the session when, you're really rolling and you just start to get things swinging at about, 50 minutes after 11, oh crap, we got 10 minutes, here's this going to happen. And honestly, a lot of this procedure, a lot of this method is about finding the therapy inside the moment and bringing that to the discussion. Because one of the things that I know I've seen talking to a lot of other professionals like educators and such who are using this in their classrooms for folks with special needs. There are a lot of folks that will take like those tensions of the moment. There's one group that has a lot of individuals who are on the autism spectrum. And parents are calling these teachers going, my God, my son has friends. Because the kids had an early session that kind of broke before they anticipated it. And these kids who had never made that social leap were like, Mom, how do I use Skype? And the mom's like, what do you need Skype for? Right, and they were like, well, I need to call the guys. We have the game tomorrow, and we need to talk about our plan. And the mom was just like tears streaming down her face, like, my God, my son has friends. And you don't think about something that simple, but the game's tension was what brought about that I need to get this done kind of moment. So
It's like any other stress in your life. Like when you have stress, you want to deal with that stress and you want to get it out as soon as you can. So when a game session ends and you have that moment where like you haven't resolved something, you will find ways outside of the game to resolve that feeling, that need for completion that we
Oh, I could just do it. I just didn't had a formal process for it and how you dealt with. I mean, are you doing like little one-shotters or continuous improvement?
it really depends on the needs of the group. If it's introduction, like if it's just the first time the group's getting into RPG, it's better to do one-shots just to kind of get them used to the rules.
Do they do social issues or are they like all dealing with the same kind of things so that they can be
It's a mix of the issues. I mean, you have to try to be careful with certain things. Like I wouldn't put a person who has very extreme anger management issues in with the person who has an abuse reactive reaction. Unless that person's like, yeah, I think I can work through this. And that's honestly a lot of the work that we're doing with Wheelhouse Workshop, and we're kind of amassing this huge army of other professionals. We're actually looking at doing like a Google Hangouts on Air series with folks like Hawk Robinson, who's on RPGresearch.com, Sarah Lynn Bowman, who wrote a wonderful book on the social functions of role-playing games, and does a lot of work in the LARP community. Like just getting together this whole idea that we realize that there are a lot of gamers who are therapists, but there aren't a lot of therapists who are gamers. So part of the struggle is first, we got to teach you how to be a GM, and to be a therapeutic GM is just laying just so much more on top of this process, because I got to worry about keeping the story intact, but I also got to worry about the therapeutic nature and like of how everyone's doing to this content and with this material. So, I mean, first, we probably advocate a two-person approach, like a dual GM system, because this way you have one person to focus on running the game, and another person to kind of sit back and like take your little scribble notes. And, you know, we're looking at not having every session be, okay, now we're done with the session, let's all talk therapy for 15 minutes. Again, this is not a peanut butter chocolate situation. They shouldn't always be thrown right together. You should be maybe doing once a month, you're doing an individual session, and use the game content as a way to explore, have any of these situations come up in your life lately? That conflict that you have, I mean, we're also looking at journaling and a self-assessment questionnaire to basically help measure, you know, self-growth, looking at things like CAFAS assessment for children and teens, you know, so we're looking at a lot of the legitimacy aspect to it, which is another big thing in our research-driven kind of field, so.
And the weird thing that we're finding is that there is not one set modality for this. There is not a hard and fast, this is how you do it.
No
And
rules,
we're-
but many guidelines.
Yeah, we're in the process of trying to create something that's largely acceptable as the mode to do it. And in the process, we keep just discovering more and more things along the way, which is why we want to start doing the Google Hangouts with all the professionals that we've been talking to, so we can kind of get everybody in the same room at one time, instead of having, well, I talked to this person, and then I told this person about the discussion, but then somehow we got on the subject of pizza, and now I don't...
Pizza.
Now I'm tired, you know?
We had one more question here in the center, and did you, okay.
So I'm a counselor at a community-based
Okay.
mental health organization, and I work with adults who have moderate to severe mental illness.
Okay.
Are there any materials out there to work with individuals who may have schizophrenia or delusions that you might not want to just have in a role play? Because that's my concern. I'm sitting here going, that's great, but I don't know if I necessarily want to encourage delusions that we don't challenge, but.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there actually are, and again, we could perhaps do the same thing that we were talking about over here, about talking maybe after the break. One of the things that we're looking at with this whole model is looking to target for a symptom in addition to looking globally at a diagnosis. Because you're right, there may be some individuals that may have an issue distinguishing between fantasy and reality.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the hallmarks of schizophrenia. So in some respects, there are folks who say, well, wait a minute. Why don't we create the game that represents where their theory of mind is right now? Let's let them play around in their world, and let's see what that tells us about that person. So there are some folks that say we could turn this into a playground because, you know, they always say don't confront the delusion. So what if we embrace the delusion but do so in a controlled setting? That is an option. There are also therapeutic benefits to board gaming, which is another aspect of the tabletop hobby that we love talking about, and actually is the next portion.
Next up.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's our next topic. So again, folks wanting more information, we do have business cards. Please also don't forget, we have our handout postcards.
Yeah, would you mind vanning that for us?
Vanning.
Creating all kinds of verbs this morning, man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hold on.
Inside the D20, you will find wristbands. They say "Save Against Fear." The reason that they say this is because every year, and this year it's going to be in October, we run a fundraising benefit called Save Against Fear. It's a game convention. We get GMs and volunteers together and essentially just run games all weekend. And the function of it is so that we can raise funds to help us continue to develop the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and also I wrote some of the web address of my system. It's Tubo's Marvelous Wish Granting Engine as a sort of a library for sort of trauma.
Great.
Sort of, and the actual thing that it teaches is if you can't actually get out, what can you do to survive?
Nice.
You know, because that's not the kind of person that you could plausibly get for a therapist at all.
And I don't want to ignore this gentleman who also had a question and came to the front of the room, because you had your hand raised, right?
Oh, well, I work at Vegas, so I was just noting time.
Oh,
Okay, great. Thank you. So that's why he had his hand raised. We're going to have to take a really short break. And if anybody in here is going to be interested, we are going to be discussing more of the tabletop board games, card games coming up in the next session. Thank you all very much for coming. You can look up any of our information on the bodonagroup.com.
Yeah, it's.
Thank you.